On today's episode of Locked On Lightning, we wrap up our thoughts and feelings from that Game 2 loss. We talk about all the things that did happen, as well as the things that didn't happen. We talk about all that and more on Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Adam Danker. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Locked On Lightning. Just a reminder, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed. That's $150. Win or lose, visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. On this episode, we're talking about really our final thoughts and feelings from the Game 2 overtime loss. We talk about a tale as old as time, the Lightning starting from scratch, as well as wrapping things up with our expectations, as well as hopes for Game 3. So Game 2 was, I think we could all agree, a game for the Lightning that had a lot to unpack. We obviously did not get everything out last night when we talked about it. We missed some stuff. Obviously, the big glaring thing from this game, when you're going, if let's say you're a Lightning fan, you didn't watch the game last night, or you missed some of it. One of the things that a lot of people, as well as myself, look back on this game and really thought that was kind of the moment, other than the Dumba Bobrovsky crazy save and all that. But at least for me, I'm sure there's some other Lightning fans that feel this way. But for me, one of the moments in which really I thought the Lightning, if they could just execute here, the game is theirs, because it really was a tight game, obviously, but it was the 4-minute minor, that the penalty that Chernak drew, and the Lightning, I kind of said to myself before the power play started, I said, there's no way they cannot score on this. We're talking about the best team in the league on the power play this season. The best team. And not only are you gifted a power play, but it's a double minor. That's 4 minutes. And what happens? The Lightning completely, somehow, in their infinite way, are just able to not get anything going. And that, before that, I said to myself that if they could execute here, the game is theirs. On the other side of that coin, I firmly believed that if Florida could stop this power play, then game is theirs. And that's obviously what ended up happening. And I'm surprised even the game went to overtime, considering just how terrible that was, that whole power play experience, where really the Lightning did a phenomenal job of really not playing well. And I saw on social media, and I kind of referred to it on last night's episode as well, about how really, there was a lot of missed calls, not only in last night's game, but also in Game 1, that should have gone the Lightning's way. But my response to that is that we can't sit here and say that is the reason why the outcome is what it was. No, we can't. And you can't say that the Lightning have not gotten their fair share of calls in this series. I mean, they've been on the power play 8 times. 8 times. You know how many times they've executed on the power play? Twice. Last night, okay, you go 1 for 2 on the power play. All right, really, in reality, you should have gone 2 for 2. That's it. I mean, but in game 1, you know, we've talked about missed opportunities in this game, in this series, really. But and let me just correct myself. Last night was 1 for 6. I was looking at game 1's box score. They were 1 for 6 last night. So yes, they should have at least, I think, in my opinion, gone 2 for 6, maybe 3 for 6 if you're feeling a little bit selfish or whatever you want to use. But yeah, I mean, we can't sit here and say, especially last night, that the refs missed some calls. I mean, the Lightning were on the power play 6 times. 6 times. I mean, how many more opportunities do you want? And what it goes back to is really the fact that this team just almost at times, whether it be the beginning of the game or now that we're seeing on the special teams, just almost subconsciously refuses to do the right thing. Now, I don't know if that's a diversion from game plan. I don't know if that's a conscious thing that the players are doing. I don't know if that's the direction that they are receiving from the coaching staff. But whatever it is, it needs to stop, and it needs to go back to where we were in March. We need to become the team that beat 5 future playoff teams, including the Florida Panthers. And on top of that, we posted a funny meme tonight on our social media accounts. If you haven't checked that out, go ahead. LO_Lightning on Twitter, Lockdown_Lightning on Instagram. But, you know, as funny as it is, it's not funny. We posted a picture of Nikita Kucherov on a milk carton. Have you seen this person? And I think that, you know, how do you expect, I think I said after game 1, how do you expect to win this series when your best player is not showing up? The guy, I get it. You know, the Panthers are doing a very good job in bottlenecking him. But guess what? Great players find a way to overcome that. I think a lot of you could agree with me. Okay? Great players find a way. The thing that was troubling to me at certain points last night, especially with Coach, not only the fact that he was pretty much a ghost out there, was just kind of listing lazily down the ice, kind of just skating without a care in the world. You know, sometimes, like I've said early on in the season, like I said in years past, when just Kucherov just forgets how to play hockey, you know, sometimes being the most talented player on the ice is the most difficult job to have. But at the same time, there's certain times where you got to say F it and just take over. All the great ones do it. We've seen it from Gretzky, seen it Lemieux, and I'm talking about playoffs. McKinnon, McDavid, Crosby. List goes on of great players that have really just gone out there and just Messier, who's on the broadcast on a nightly basis for the playoffs now. Really what I'm trying to say is that this was a game that, you know, some games you want to take with you and pick apart and use them as motivation. This is a game you need to forget about, because there was really, the only positive thing from this game was actually 2 things. Vasilevsky played phenomenal. He kept them in this. I think he was really the only legitimate reason as to why this game went into overtime. And the other thing was, I guess, the second period. I guess we could say that. But other than that, really, there's not a lot of positives to take from this. So let me know in the comments. I know we are a little over 24 hours removed from game 2. The Lightning are down, of course, 2-0 in this series. Is there time for them to come back? Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's, it's going to be difficult, especially with the way they're playing, but at the same time, it is not impossible. We'll talk about that, of course, at the end of the episode. But coming up in segment 2, we're going to be talking about or retouching upon a topic that we've talked about basically to exhaustion on this podcast throughout the season. Now we're talking about it in the playoffs. Is the Lightning getting back to square one? Talk about everything that entails, what they got to do to get back to where they need to be. Why are we at this moment? We talk about that as well. But first, we're going to talk about a couple of our sponsors on today's show. First of which is our friends over at eBay Motors. Now, passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And we're going to be talking about our next sponsor, and that is our friends over at FanDuel. Now, listen, people, it's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all in the app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So as always, I want to thank everybody for joining us here on Locked On Lightning. It's been a pretty mentally exhausting first 2 games of this playoff series. And I unfortunately have to tell you that it's probably not going to get any better in terms of just, the drama that is the Stanley Cup playoffs. And the Lightning sure do love drama, as we have seen throughout the course of the season, and really over the last couple of years during the playoffs. Usually they turn it on, and, unfortunately that hasn't been the case quite yet. But listen, the thing that we've always talked about this Lightning team, and we could say it in a ton of different ways, is when they are bad, they are abysmally bad or atrocious or whatever adjective you want to use to describe how bad things could get for the Tampa Bay Hockey Club. And we talk about a lot here on the podcast how really more times than not, whether it be after a loss or a couple of days off and then losing or whatever the case may be, the common theme that has always been here on Locked On Lightning has been the Lightning's inability to get back to square one, to figure it out right away. I touched upon it very briefly on last night's episode, how really, and that the concerning thing now in a best of 7 is with this team, who takes 1, 2, maybe 3 games to get things going again, is that, you don't have that grace period that you do during the regular season. I mean, we saw it the last week of the season. The Lightning were just a team struggling to figure it out. It was like seeing someone trying to run in quicksand and not learning their lesson. We've seen it numerous times throughout the course of the season, how bad this team could be, especially when they start losing a couple in a row. And that's the thing that is really concerning me in this playoff series. Do I think that they still have as good of a chance as any to come back and win the series? Absolutely. Absolutely. But we have to see a completely different Lightning team in game 3. Completely. Everything needs to change except Andrei Vasilevsky. I mean, I don't know what more you could ask out of this guy. You've been waiting all season for him to really do what he's doing now. And how do you repay him? You basically fall asleep at the wheel on the special teams in the first period. And that's where it really starts with this Lightning team. And I mean, you could find it anywhere on the internet or on social media. And even here on Locked On Lightning, it's been talked about so much this season. How this team has been so bad. Don't even look at the numbers because the numbers are very misleading. This team, and this is for someone who has really only watched a good portion of the teams in the NHL because they have played the Lightning this year. But I would have to say, numbers aside, if you had someone sit down this season and watch every NHL game, I would probably bet money on FanDuel if it was available that person who is doing these rankings would probably name the Lightning as the worst first period team. If not, they are the first worst period team out of all the playoff teams. I mean, it's one thing, and this goes, in my opinion, hand in hand with all the way up to the top. I'm not saying it's a lack of leadership, but it's a lack of maybe going in a different direction. And I'm not saying now what's done is done. That was something that should have been done in the regular season. The time is not now to completely rewrite the book. But when you're making the same mistakes that you have been making repeatedly over and over again, especially the one that has been the most glaring. I mean, you could probably put neutral zone puck possession probably very close to just first period play and together as probably the two terrible things that the Lightning do. It's one of those things where you can't help but wonder, what is the conversation that is being had in the locker room? And to be honest, we'll never know. We'll never get an honest answer. And I'm not saying, anyone's dishonest, because that's just hockey culture. Maybe once the series is over, if the Lightning are eliminated, maybe we'll get some sort of explanation as to what happened. But we'll never get a deep dive on what really transpired, what people were thinking, what was the game plan coming out of the gates. Did they really think it was going to go down like that? Because everything that I have seen in this series from this Lightning team, and by extension, the coaching staff, shows me that they really thought they could just go out, change it, or not change it. I mean, if they did change it, there was zero tell of that. But go out there and expect a completely different scenario. And that shows me that they think they're too smart for their own good. And it's concerning. It's really concerning because, hypothetically speaking, what happens if this team comes back and win the series? What's stopping them from going into the next series? I don't know who they would play right now, but it doesn't matter. You're gonna play a very good team, obviously, and a team that is gonna very much exploit the way you play. But really, what it comes down to is that you have the days off. What are you supposed to do? Just start again? I hate to say it, really, at this point in time, I've as talented and as optimistic as I am that the Lightning will get back on the right track. And I'm not going to say that they're getting swept. Absolutely not. That would be a whole nother level of catastrophic disaster that would require probably more than 30 minutes on this podcast to even pick apart. But this team really right now has not shown me that they are not only built for the playoffs, but they're not even built to start a playoff game. And I mean, you look at the three guys on this team that have really stepped up in the first couple of games. You know, Stamkos, who is a seasoned vet, so no surprise there. Hagel's goal in game 1. Game 2, we get one from Point. And that's it. That's pretty much it. Like I said, it's a very big problem. I said this early on. It's a huge problem when your best player, Nikita Kucherov, I think we could agree that if he didn't dress last night and nobody told us, and you just watched the game with the same audio, nobody would have noticed the difference, really, except for the secondary assist. Probably would have gone another way. So really, in summation, we need a complete 180 on this team. We need a complete overhaul. And I'm not saying let's change lines. Yes, let's tweak things here and there in certain situations. But I'm saying we need to see a different mentality tomorrow night. And I mean that for real, because if you show up in the first period in your own building in the playoffs down 2-0, and you play the way we saw you play last night, we got big issues. And I hope for those of you that are listening to this podcast, if you are going to be at Amalie tomorrow night and the Lightning come out and lay an absolute egg in the first period, I hope you boo them off the ice as they go into the first intermission. I hope you let them hear it. I hope they skate down the tunnel, walk down the tunnel with their heads hang low, knowing how dire this is. So let me know in the comments below. I mean, listen, as much as I am optimistic that this team is going to turn it around, not probably in the way that we would like them to see it. It's probably going to be a nail biter tomorrow night. But I'm not holding out hope just because we've already seen how bad it is. I mean, how much worse can it get than 3 shots in a period? Really? Come on. And barely any support from your players other than maybe a handful of guys even. We'll have to see, and we'll talk more about it in the third segment. Expectations coming up in just a little bit. Make sure to stay around for that. But first, we're going to wrap things up with our last 2 sponsors of today's show, one of which is our friends over at Sleeper. Now, we are in the playoffs, first round. Lightning are down 2-0. Really, the energy is low. The expectations are low now. The optimism is very low. Everything's low. But regardless of where the Lightning or how they're doing in this playoff series, I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number 1 choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey games and contests. All you have to do is pick guys like Steven Stamkos and, let's say, Andrei Vasilevsky to record more or less than their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, or more in a given game. So use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. And wrapping things up with our last sponsor of today's show, and that is our friends over at Indeed. Now, when you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could handpick the best stars for your business team like you do with your fantasy team? If you're building your talent roster, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you could attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills. when you could do it all with Indeed. Find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like matching, assessments, and virtual interviews. Hate waiting. Indeed's U.S. data shows over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job. I've been telling you since we've had Indeed on our show that I had a friend, he started his own business, and the demands of the business grew way faster than he ever expected. He used Indeed. He found 3 quality candidates in the span of a week, hired them all, and his business has grown even more because of those people. And you have to go on Indeed too. If you're an employer, this is a must-have for you. So go ahead now with Indeed. You only pay for quality applications that meet your hiring criteria. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon. Start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. So one last time, I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcast are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel there. Hit that notification button. So as soon as the newest episode drops, you'll be notified. And also go over to our social media pages, LO_Lightning on Twitter, as well as LockedOn_Lightning on Instagram. You could give me a follow on Twitter and reach out to me there if you wish at DankyDank, DENKYD8NK. Love hearing from y'all. Can't wait to hear from you during tomorrow night's game. So, yeah, we just got done pretty much torching the Lightning for things that they need to do. Just the absolute ridiculousness of starting back from square one in the middle of a playoff series. We're talking about game 3, people. And I didn't realize till afterwards. Actually, someone reached out to me after the show was posted, actually early this morning, that I did of a little Allen Iverson-esque kind of rant there where I spoke about how I said, we're not talking about regular season games. We're talking about playoffs. And I think that's the football coach. I can't think of the commercial. I think it's a Coors commercial. But anyway, we're looking at expectations here for the Lightning in game 3. And my expectations for this game, or really my hopes for this game, rather, is just go out there and play a first solid 20. After whatever happens after that, the Lightning have kind of figured it out at this point. They've gotten the second period thing down pretty much. Third is kind of running out of steam there. But the first period, you got to go out there with a bang in your home building. You can't let this team hit the ground running from the initial puck drop. I mean, like I said, if you are in attendance and the Lightning lay an absolute egg in the first period of tomorrow night's game, I hope you, and I'm not a big booer person for those who are wondering or kind of shaking their heads. I think it's ridiculous, really, in most sports, to boo an opposing person or or even your own team. But I think the situation calls for it. I think that this team has almost to a certain degree gotten complacent with the deficiencies in their game. And like I said, what's done is done. This is April 24th. We're talking about this. This isn't October 1st. Okay. Going back and trying to reinvent the wheel isn't going to work in a day. Okay. That's just not something that's going to happen. I expect there to still be some glaring issues out of this game. I really think, though, that the Lightning, if they very much are intent on putting on a good performance tomorrow night, as I would imagine they are, as well as winning that game and getting back into the series, because make no mistake about it, you win tomorrow night, you are back in the series, and then you've gotten your foot back into the door. That means you win game 4, boom, you're starting from scratch. You're going back with 2 wins under your belt, okay? And those 2 wins are statements. They're saying, well, guess what? We can't beat you at home. Bam, you can't beat us at home. But my expectations for this game really are the Lightning. They need to take it away, or they should, if they haven't figured it out, they need to make this game about speed. What Florida's doing early on, which is very impressive, which I'm surprised certain teams haven't been able to replicate this. They're going out there and they're banging real hard off the initial puck drop. They're slowing down the Lightning, and the Lightning need to get away from that game. They are obviously undersized, and all they're doing is slowing themselves down. What they need to do is have more finesse, more creativity. Kucherov needs to get his game going, okay? We can't expect him to really try and pick it up in the second period or late second. At that point, it's pretty much it's too late. But he needs help from his teammates. The Lightning need to do a way better job early on in the neutral zone. That's going to be a huge focus for both teams tomorrow. I'm not saying you have to play perfect tomorrow night, but you need to play just well enough to give yourself a chance, because the way Andrei Vasilevskiy is playing right now, I mean, a better performance these first two games with the way he has played. I mean, maybe last night, maybe you lose just because Bobrovsky was just on a whole nother level. Let's give credit where credit is due. That was just a whole nother, that I think Bobrovsky was having an out-of-body experience in net last night. That's how good he was. But you play well enough to compete in games 1 and 2. You're going back to Tampa splitting the series. I think we can all agree. You play somewhat of a coherent game in game 1, and especially game 2 in the first period. And guess what? Yeah, you're probably winning one of those games. And that's what the Lightning need to do. They need to play coherent hockey. They need to come out in the first period ready to go, not like they just woke up from a pregame nap. Okay? So let me know your expectations. I expect Vasilevskiy to be phenomenal once again tomorrow night. I expect Point, Hagel, Stamkos, Paul to be heavily involved early on offensively. Cirelli is going to be involved early on. The only big question mark, and depending on how those guys play, is very dependent on 86. Are we going to even see him tomorrow night? I mean, he'll be in uniform. He'll be on the ice, but are we going to see him? Or are we going to see hockey player X, Mr. Average? Are we going to see the guy who competed and scored 100 assists this year and over 140 points this year? Or are we going to see some guy who is just kind of almost look like he's afraid to shoot the puck or get involved or make bonehead cross-ice passes? So let me know in the comments below. What are your predictions? What are your expectations? I want to know it all. And we'll be back tomorrow after tomorrow night's game. Hopefully we're talking about a Lightning win. And hopefully we're talking about a way better performance early on in this game. So until then, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.